Foster, and I am Vice President of Business Development, and I'm General Manager of the Nashville office for Symphonic Distribution. In what we do, we are a distributor, but we also try to be a service provider of other levels of service to artists, including things like marketing, publishing administration, YouTube monetization, user-generated content monetization, a la TikTok, etc. Sync representation through our sister company, Bodega Sync, which is based in the heart of Brooklyn, and has an incredible staff there. It really just try to serve to plug holes for artists and to assist artists and labels in really being able to monetize and grow revenues in every possible lane. And so my job here is pretty unique in that not only do I sign distribution clients, but I'm also working on the sync side of things because I bring, a wealth of sync experience to the table. So that kind of reports up through me. I'm working on the user-generated content side of things, trying to find new technologies to help you guys monetize your music. So one of the people that I love to talk to about this subject and about just music and the state of things today in general is Mr. Jay Gilbert. And so please join me in welcoming him here today. Jay is no stranger in the world of music. He is the co-founder and head of digital strategy for Label Logic, which is an incredible consultancy that I've had the pleasure of working with here and there tangentially. And I think we're going to be doing some more things down the road, knock on wood. But Jay comes to us basically having stepped foot in many of the majors that we all hold up on pedestals, or some hold up on pedestals, from Warner Music Group to Fox to Universal. He's kind of been there and done that on all fronts. He's worked with the likes of Kiss, with Johnny Cash, with Nirvana, with his favorite band, The Accidentals, who I've grown to love over the last year or so. And he's actually quite an accomplished photographer, concert photographer.
Well, Ace Frehley, if you want to get into the Kiss camp, but yeah.
Anyhow, so thank you all for being here so much, and thank you, Jay, for joining us today.
My pleasure, and always a pleasure to get together and do coffee talk with you, and this time we have an audience.
So the theme of today is wide and general, and so we're going to hit a lot of topics. And we'll have questions at the end for sure. But the goal here is how do we have a kick-ass year in 2021? God knows it's got to be better than 2020 was. We have we've learned a lot over the last year. There are some assumptions that we all had that are out the window, and there's new knowledge here to supplant that. And so for us, I think going through some big items that we think will help everybody is going to be a nice exercise. So for our intents and purposes today, we're going to break this into two buckets: business and marketing, because they really are the two sides to the coin. They are the left brain and the right brain for every musician, every label, and one without the other is a recipe for failure in either inversion. And so I would like to talk about starting out with the business side of things and go over some things that we think would be beneficial to do here as we're launching into 2021. My favorite exercise in the world for labels and artists is called a revenue completeness check. Jay, I'm pretty sure you've done this with your clients in the past. Do you want to just kind of start us down that road? Actually, hold on. Let me look. We don't all have our cameras on, so it's going to be really tough for me to tell. But as far as, are you an artist? Are you on the business side? Can we get a show of hands before we started on this? Okay. Oh, look, I got you guys to turn your cameras on. Hi, Allie. Awesome. Okay. And the rest of you, I would assume, are on the business side. So that works out solidly. So Jay, when I say revenue completeness check, what goes through your head?
Well, I think of it as 1/3 of the audience that we look at, right? There's three audiences typically. There's commerce, sales streams and downloads, basically. And there's merch and other things, but just looking at that. Then, there's the audience on socials, and there's the audience of the people that see you live. And what we like to do is look at that commerce and really look at where it is today, but more importantly, set goals. So let's say you're starting a release cycle, you're starting, the year, whatever it is. I think it's really important to have goals across all those different verticals. Sales streams and downloads are kind of the obvious ones, but there are so many other ways to create revenue, whether it's with merch, whether it's with publishing, whether it's sync licensing, and all sorts of other things. So I think it's really good to have those goals and then communicate those to your team. And if you're starting out, your team may be your wife, husband, girlfriend, whatever, bandmates. But I think it's crucial that you have a snapshot of where you are in all of those different areas and then have some goals set.
Solid answer there, sir. So as we look at revenue, we obviously have to break it up into buckets because, as we all know, we have the master side of what we do and we have the publishing side of what we do. And though they commingle, the places where we run to find the money in either and or both often are not the same. And so, I think, I'd like to start down the road of master revenue completeness and just make sure that we check all the boxes for that. So as Jay mentioned, we've got your streaming revenues, we've got, the sync revenues and things like that are out front. But, more and more, I still am encountering lots and lots of artists and labels that have never, ever gone and claimed Sound Exchange money. And I think if you have not registered with Sound Exchange as an artist, do so before we're off this Zoom call. Pull up another window.
Hey, Randall, just really quickly, just for those who don't know about Sound Exchange, can you talk just a little bit about non-interactive streaming and what that's all about?
Yeah, of course. So obviously, if you have a track on Spotify and that track gets a play, you're paid for that track's play. We ran into, in the industry back in the early 2000s, we ran into an issue with web radio where a track would get play and there was no one really knew how to monetize that or really how to pay out on it. And so Sound Exchange was established as a nonprofit that would go and collect from non-interactive streaming operations. And so really kind of first and foremost on that list was Pandora, but it's of course since expanded greatly. And basically anywhere where music just happens, where you don't select the music is qualified as non-interactive. Yeah, absolutely. Sirius XM is a big piece of that. Anything that streams like that. Radio Disney is another big piece of that. And we've seen here locally, we've seen artists that all of a sudden get a lot of interest from Sirius XM, look up and that Sound Exchange check comes in and they're like, holy crap, where did this come from? I always have to go back in arrears and explain, okay, this is where that money came from. Don't expect it every time, but this is because of this spike that we saw in your digital radio play. But so Sound Exchange is really, really important. In the United States, we don't have any performance protection for sound recordings. This is due to the old radio lobby. And this goes back to the invention of radio, when they said, well, radio is going to be a promo for the records, so why would we pay when we're promoting them? And the same principle has continued and has held on in the U.S.
In the U.S., yeah.
For more than 50 years. And so Sound Exchange was kind of a stopgap procedure to say, okay, that's fine, big radio, we get it. Your terrestrial play, you don't want to pay for it. That's fine. But what about that web stream you've got going on? And it was a way for us to go back in the back end and find a way to monetize. And so it is really, really, really imperative that you all get registered there. If you're a client of Symphonic, we can do the collection for you. Absolutely can. You can do it yourself. If you have a big catalog, it's a major pain in the tail. There's a lot of data involved. If you're a client of ours, we can do it for you. But if you're not a client of ours, or if you are a client of ours, it would behoove you to go take a look, because that, to me, and it's something that we've been kind of educating on for a long time, but Sound Exchange money is real money. And you can go back, especially if Symphonic is doing it for you, we actually can go back and collect back pay from Sound Exchange for you. We can go back several years worth of revenue for you. And so something definitely to consider on the master side. I think probably the most important thing to consider on the master side. Every artist I meet is so worried about getting in the studio, cutting the perfect track, and a release strategy, but they're never worried about the back end follow up that comes and brings more revenue.
Yeah.
And so I really do think that's a good place to start. Other master monetizations items, obviously include the traditional distribution lane, include traditional sync. Of course, sync is a buyer's market and is tough. And so,
I always like to tell people a little bit about sync, only because I notice that even with some managers that I work with, they don't have a full picture about sync. And yeah, it's synchronization, and people think of getting your music in, a TV commercial or in a film, but it's also, games. There's a lot of games that are putting music in there, and that's a sync license too. And there's no, statutory rate, so it's all negotiated, and you can make some very good money with sync.
Yeah, it's absolutely the wild, wild west on rates. There are norms, but there are no rules. So you'll hear of the errant AC/DC sync that yields $1 million for something that normally would be a $200,000 sync. The reality is it just depends on how bad the client wants the music. But you're right, in all of those traditional medias, from film, TV, advertising, video games, those are the big ones. There's also ancillary items and places you can earn in that lane as well. There's licensing into consumer goods. When I was doing sync in a former life, at one point I licensed music into a hospital bed. No crap, seriously, I licensed music into a hospital bed. It paid well. You can listen to Mozart when you're getting ready to get put under. It was a whole shtick they had. But the other piece to look at on the sync front, and this is much more accessible for a lot of people, is microsync. And microsync is traditional sync's little brother, and it's an more automated system. It's it's for creators, content creators on YouTube, etc. Can go to these libraries and can go grab music and pay a nominal fee. They always used to lean back and say it was for wedding videographers is where it started, and it's become more about content play now.
Yeah.
But in aggregate, microsync can pay really well, and I've seen people make impressive amounts of money there. And so I'd urge you to look into that as well. Again, we're going to talk about a lot of things here that Symphonic does and can do for you. I'm biased. I'm sitting in an office with a letterhead that says Symphonic in front of me, so I'm going to talk about us and what we do. Look around though. Look around. There's many players out there, but we are certainly here to help on that front. And all of that sync items for us run through Bodega. They all run specifically through John Mizrahi and his team over there in Bodega. So the master is pretty simple, and we've kind of hit that really quickly here. The publishing is where it gets really hairy. And so, as we're doing this revenue completeness check, I think it's really imperative that we look at the monetization we're doing on the publishing side of things. Are we registered with a PRO? Was question number one. If you're not, do it. You have to. Right. Somebody has to. Either you have to, or you've got to get an admin.
And when you say PRO, you're talking about ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, those types of performance rights organizations who will collect those performance rights revenue for you, right?
Or SOCAN in Canada, or SACIM in France. Each territory has its own respective PRO, and it's really important that I preach a lot to artists that they need to be a good steward of their own business. And I think that this is one of those cases where, there's lots and lots of thick books that will tell you how to make it in the music industry. But there are in actuality just a number of tasks that I think that if anybody takes upon themselves to do, you're going to see financial upside out of it. So once you're with a PRO, the next step of that whole situation would be, and this is something after you're actually making some money, would be looking into publishing administration or a publishing deal, as it were. I'm in Nashville, which is publishing central for the United States. And so everybody here is looking for a publishing deal. I think it's important to note that they don't have to be a full publishing deal. You don't have to sell your whole catalog. You don't have to sell your life to a publishing company. You can shave off percentages. You can sell pieces of back catalog. You can do a 50-50 deal, which we call a co-publishing deal, where you gain the strength of the publisher, but at the same time, you're in a partnership of sorts. And I'm actually a really big fan of the co-publishing deal. Jay, have you done much in that lane?
No, I mean, this is kind of where you grew up in the industry, right? I mean, I've been reading a lot lately about neighboring rights, for example. And I'd love for you to just kind of touch on that, because there's so many areas of publishing. People are inherently afraid of what they don't understand, but as you demystify these things, it's not so scary. But can you touch on neighboring rights a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Neighboring rights do apply to publishing, but more so they're more interesting on the master side. I'll be quite honest. And it's very similar to what we talked about with Sound Exchange at 5 minutes ago. Sound Exchange really it's for the US, it covers the US. Neighboring rights are for public performance of sound recordings and worldwide. And so, we have a lot of clients that are looking to get into neighboring rights collection. Neighboring rights works really well if you're getting airplay, if you have syncs and your music is on TV, if there's secondary performances happening of your music in those lanes. Neighboring rights is something that is absolutely worth looking into. Yet again, something we can do for you, but we have to be very careful about it, because like so many other lanes, it's a little bit like registering all of the songs you wrote with a PRO. It doesn't really make sense to register a song that you wrote unless it's commercially earning. Registering it with a performance royalty organization is not the same as copywriting it. And so, if you register a bunch of non-earning songs with your PRO, once they begin earning, you're going to end up with data conflicts and dual registrations that'll mess you up. So we look at the neighboring rights in the same way, where what we want to do is, if you've got catalog that's getting airplay, especially throughout all of the European territory, especially, it's got, yes, absolutely, go and set up the neighboring rights. We are in a partnership with a company called PRO Agency, who's a phenomenal partner and based in Europe and does great work in the neighboring rights space. And so that's a great item to bring up. Neighboring rights do come into play with publishing, but I don't think it carries as big of a stick with publishing as it does with master side. With the master side. So getting those ducks in a row are important. Obviously, getting your own business ducks in a row are important. I think, my tip to all the artists early in the fall was take this time, look at your brand, look at your marketing. What are you doing with your marketing? Is your branding the same across every social platform you're on?
Yeah.
There are little details like that really, really matter. And I think now is a great time to kind of tiptoe into the marketing side of things and talk about that, I think, because, this is where business and marketing kind of line up.
Yeah, I think that's super important. And I tell people that every day as well. There's certain things that you can control. Clearly, you can control the look and feel of your socials, your banners, and your artist image. And now, on a lot of the DSPs, you can control a lot, right? Spotify more than the others. You can put like 140 photos in there, your bio, your social links, your images. But even on now, Apple Music, Amazon Music, you're now able to kind of control that same artist image. So it's consistent across the board. And I think it makes a big difference. There's nothing worse than seeing an artist's socials or on a DSP and seeing an old image with maybe a member of the band that's not in the band anymore, or something that's just dated. So I think that's a key point.
Absolutely. So I apologize. I was moving too fast. We had a couple of questions. I'm going to back up really quick.
Oh, cool.
So, gosh, my eyes with the sun. So we have Christian Hoffman asks, is Sound Exchange the US version of PRS? PRS for music is the UK version of a mechanical Collection Society. Christian, I do believe, I'm not an expert on PRS at all, so this may be slightly flawed. I do believe that they do work along the same lines as Sound Exchange, though PRS is much better recognized, at least in my head, as a mechanical collection society, as well as one of the interesting things PRS did was they did level the playing field on sync payouts in the UK. And television shows and things like that in the UK, productions that are there are on a rate card that's established by PRS. So they're very similar, though there are some key differences there. We have two more quick questions and then we'll keep going. Justin Butler asked quickly, can you, I assume Symphonic is the question, the royal you, collect for a label's entire catalog on Sound Exchange? The answer to that is absolutely yes. If you own the catalog and want to do the data wrangling, you can do it yourself. We are also equipped to do this for you very easily. So after this is all said and done, I'll share my contact information with anybody who wants it. And any questions like that can specifically come into me. I'd be glad to help. Bree Miles asked about what company do we suggest for sync? That is Bodega Sync. BODEGASYNC.com. Go check it out. It is, we launched that about 2 years ago. We've had some really, really cool success there. Most recently, I got something in the Blacklist a week ago. We've got a bunch of Netflix shows featuring our music. We just, I think we licensed 6 or 7 tracks into a big T-Mobile promotion that was going kind of around the Super Bowl. And this is all independent music. These aren't name brand folks. These are people who are just out there, busting their butts.
Hey, Randall, what do they provide to you besides maybe instrumental versions or, the masters? Is there anything people need to supply to you? Pitch deck, blurbs, images, anything else?
So at a bare minimum, and this is good. This goes for anyone going after sync. It doesn't matter if you're working with Bodega and Symphonic or anybody else. You need to have your full version of whatever your track is. You need to have an instrumental version of whatever your track is. Perfect case scenario, you need to have stems available for every track you have.
Do you need a clean version?
Absolutely. And if you have adult language in your tune, it can severely limit the use of your song. And going back many years, we all remember the Black Eyed Peas anthem, "Let's Get It Started." Let's Get It Started. Everybody knew "Let's Get It Started." Well, I actually was a club DJ when that originally came out. When Ella Funk came out about a year and a half before "Let's Get It Started," the single went out. Do you remember that, Jay?
Yeah.
Do you remember what the actual title?
No, what was the line?
It was "Let's Get Retarded." Which of course is an awful word that I don't like to use in my daily discourse. But they found that song didn't perform with that title. They changed that bit of it, and all of a sudden, explosive growth for them. And this is before the Black Eyed Peas were big. This was really kind of on the trajectory for them. And so it's always good to have a clean version, and also to look at your lyrics through a lens of, is this divisive? Is this content going to drive people away from me or bring people to me? Look, I don't want to get in the way of anybody's creative arc. And I think that everybody puts words in places for specific reasons. But my job is to find the place where art and commerce meet and help the art succeed at commerce. And so that's my recommendation for that. Okay, so we jump backwards. We're going to go back forwards to marketing again and dive a little deeper. So we had talked about brand and brand consistency across all platforms. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about those platforms.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about that consistency. I'm a professional photographer, and it's really important to me that when you see an image, that you can hear the music, that it speaks to that brand that you talked about. And it's surprising sometimes how there's a disconnect between the imagery and the actual brand and the sound. So I think that's one important thing to kind of bring up. And then to your point, talking about the platforms, I look at them, I kind of separate them from, commerce and then socials, so Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, et cetera. All of those places, you control so much about how you're perceived, whether it's your bio, whether it's your images, all of those things. And then on the commerce side, like we mentioned a second ago, with Spotify for artists, Apple Music for artists, Amazon Music for artists, but also, Pandora AMP. And then I like to kind of dig a little bit deeper, and we can talk about this a little bit more in a bit, but with some of the other platforms that are out there, that help the industry, whether it's Jaxsta, whether it's, Chartmetric, Sound Charts, Viberate. I want to make sure that branding is consistent across all of those platforms as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, can you talk a little bit about Jaxsta? I know they're pretty new on the scene, and I know the role they play, but I imagine the people here in the room aren't fully up to scale on that. I've never done any business work with them. I've just followed them as a fanboy for a little while here.
Yeah, I haven't done any business with them, but I reached out to them about the podcast, and we had some conversations, and I met up with them at Music Biz. And I just love it because I'm really big on metadata, and we could talk for hours just about metadata and how it's delivered. This is the artist name, the version, the tracks, the publishing splits and all of that. And it's delivered so differently depending on who's delivering it to, let's say, the DSPs. And I'm really hopeful that we get to a point where that data is delivered and there's enough fields to credit all of the people that were involved, whether you're a sideman, engineer, whatever it is. If you're involved in those recordings, I think that's key. And what I love about Jaxsta is that's providing this place where you can see who's involved with all of these different projects in many different ways, but you can also claim your page. Or if you're an artist manager or someone like me that works with multiple artists, you can claim these pages and help them get the data correct. There are some times where you have a band name that sounds like another band name, and sometimes they get cross-pollinated. So there are ways that you can just make sure that all of that data is correct. And you can also use that as a tool depending on if you're an A&R person, if you're going to find information on people. I want it to get to the point where if you're on a DSP, for example, that if I want to look and see what records has Chris Lord-Alge worked on, that I'll be able to search on that. Which songs has Brett James written for other people? What albums has Christian McBride played bass on? We have all of this at our fingertips. We're just not quite there yet. And I think Jaxsta is really taking a lead when it comes to metadata.
Really kind of like an IMDb
for music,
right?
Yeah.
Very cool. Well,
I love it.
And I don't currently work with Jaxsta, so you should check that out on your own. But I have been a big fan of everything they've been doing. You mentioned Chartmetric, which is one of my favorite tools in the music business. And one of the things that I have to say kind of on a repeat to people that pains me most is that we're at a time and place musically and in this industry where the data about the music is almost more important than the music itself. The data about the artist's level of following on multiple platforms, fan engagement, all of these things come into play in A&R discussions. It's no longer about just discovering that raw talent on the stage with a guitar in developing it. What role does that play for you, Jay? As you're looking at new clients and you're looking to help develop your clients, I know that's a big piece of your strategy.
It is. We look at data really deeply, but there's an old saying that data is like a lamppost. You can use it to illuminate or you can use it to lean on. And I think a lot of people use data to prop up things that they already believe. We like to look a little deeper in the data to see, how do we make this actionable? What does this data actually mean? We were in a meeting one time and somebody was saying, oh, well, this record's up 12% this week. Well, the overall market was up 18%. And they neglected to mention that. So it's actually maybe underperforming. So when you talk about Chartmetric, which is one of the best tools in the business, I worked with them around the first year or so that they started out. I love what Sung Cho and his team are building over there. You can look at all the different socials and look at trends and what playlists you've been added to and taken off of and what position you're in. And I think that's important. I think you do need to know what's going on with the trends and with your music. There are other competitors that do things a little differently. Sound Charts is another one of those really great platforms. There's a new one out of Slovenia called Viberate that I really like because they show engagement. And these days, without going off the rails here, you need real engagement. And when I see a lot of likes or follows in a short period of time, I want to go and see what's happening. Are people consuming the music? Are they actively making comments, sharing things? Are there video views? What's going on the backside? Because as you probably read recently, last few weeks, hundreds of thousands of tracks were pulled down from Spotify because they were saying that they were using bots and spin farms and things like that. Well, that's really easy to see in one of these platforms, especially when you can see, okay, you've got an increase in audience. What's going on with your engagement? So the last thing I'll say on this is that you don't have to pay for a service, although I recommend that you do, but you get so much free information. Spotify for artists, Apple Music for artists, Amazon Music for artists, YouTube, Pandora amp. There's so many areas where you can go in there for free and really see how you're performing. And I still think, even though it's kind of like the cockpit of a jet, I still like going into Facebook Insights and looking at Instagram Insights and looking at that data too and seeing how things are performing. Because I say this a lot, it sounds pedantic, but you want to look at what's working, do more of that, look at what's not working and do less of that.
That's poetic. Yeah, and I think the data insights are really important. And I think that, most artists want to grow in an earnest, honest way. I am outspokenly against bots.
Yes, you are.
Symphonic does not support any botting of any kind. And we get reports, and the DSPs know. They know if you're cheating. Don't cheat. Like they know. And the thing about it is, if they suspect you of getting botted or having bad streams, they just don't pay you. There is no appeals process. So like if it looks squirrely, if all of a sudden 100% of your streams are coming from Buffalo, New York, because it's coming through an IP redirect, people know there's always smarter people out there who can figure this out. And so look at, as you're hiring marketing companies and people to help you with your brand and what you're doing, be careful about promises that are too good to be true.
I would only add one thing to that, Randall, and that is that you have to be careful who your partners are that you hire, because I had an artist have their music taken down from Spotify. They had hired a PR firm, and they didn't know that the PR firm was actually hiring this white label playlist promotion company. So make sure you ask the right questions to your partners, that they're not using some of these tactics as well.
Yeah, I would bet it's almost never the artists themselves who's doing this. It's always a team member who's just thinks they're helping, thinks they're pushing the ball a little bit further up the hill by doing this. But in all actuality, it's doing a lot more harm than it is good.
Yeah, I have some older experienced managers that'll come to me because they're used to radio promotion and they equate playlists with radio, which is not accurate. And they'll say, well, we need to hire a radio promotion person. We need to hire that person for playlists. Here's the budget for it. This is what we need. And we just say, time out. A playlist is not a marketing plan, right?
Absolutely. So I'm trying to keep track of things and keep an eye on the clock here. As we talk about marketing, let's talk about the big, enormous elephant in the corner of the room. His name is TikTok. Listen, I can't guarantee y'all much of anything, but I guarantee you if you have a track take off on TikTok, it's probably going to take off on Spotify. There are direct correlations being drawn all the way across this industry. that have led many people to go into, speculative investment into TikTok, trying to buy influencers to do things there. We are real big fans of organic growth. I believe that every artist ought to have a TikTok account. I think you have to be investing yourself into the platform. I think that we as a service deliver to TikTok on behalf of our distribution clients. We also, as a service, can collect on user uploaded items that are belonging to those clients. That it's a manual claims process, but if you have somebody that rips a track of yours off of YouTube, drops it into a TikTok video, and it goes bonkers, we can collect on behalf of you in that lane, even if it's something we didn't deliver. And this has been something we've really had to run down. It's been a skill set we've had to develop over the last year or so. We as a company are early adopters. We show up at technology when technology begins. Actually, it has a lot to do with our DNA and with our founder, who's very tech focused that way. And so Jorge is wired that way, and this place is Jorge's place. And so we inherently are wired that way. So we were at Triller before I got to the company. We were at Triller before I'd ever heard of Triller. And I came to the company on April 1st, 2019. We were at TikTok. We were one of the very first distributors at TikTok, delivering and monetizing at the channel. Yeah. And we're proud of it. We're excited to be there early.
Yeah, I'd love to get your thoughts on the audience there, because the misconception that I hear pretty regularly is that, well, we don't necessarily need to be at TikTok or Roblox or some of these things, because really that's a younger crowd, and we're a little bit older, more mature. But the more I dig into TikTok, it's across the board. I mean, look at the success of that Fleetwood Mac clip, things like that. It's catalog, it's classic, it's heritage, it's adult, it's everything from jazz, EDM, country. I mean, I don't think you can just say it's a bunch of 16-year-olds doing dance videos.
It's definitely not. And I think it's really cool. I love the democratization of music. Like we've seen this happen over the last 15, 20 years, where all of a sudden the audience is kind of calling the shots. A lot more than when it was left to gatekeepers. Yeah. And you look at the Fleetwood Mac thing, but you look at catalog at TikTok. Catalog does hugely well, especially my mea culpa. My wife is a TikTok addict, and and I don't play with it very much. It's kind of work for me. Like I can't look at TikTok and not think about the business side of it. So I try to hang that up when I go home. But what are you doing over there? It should be nothing. Looking at TikTok. But the songs and the people she's following on TikTok aren't necessarily all Cardi B. They aren't the newest, hottest thing. A lot of them are evergreens from a publishing standpoint. And I think TikTok is an incredible way to breathe life into an old catalog. Yeah. And the reality is you capture that zeitgeist moment with that piece of music where you have a 4-minute song and you capture 30 seconds of that song that gets the mood this chef is trying to convey as they're chopping onions in a very stylized video. I think it's pretty ingenious, and I think that it's a great leverage tool to market existing catalog and to try to breathe life into existing catalog.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that we tell all of our artists that they need to have a presence on TikTok. It's also one of the easiest ways to build an audience a little more quickly than Instagram or other platforms. You'd be surprised at how fast you can grab some followers there. And look around at some of your favorite artists and see what they're doing on the platform. There's so many creative things that people are doing with those little 15-second clips.
Well, and like the duets feature to me is incredible. And we have seen incredible things happen with independent artists who have a great song that catches on there. And the next thing you notice, Charlie Puth is duetting with them.
Yes.
For fun.
Yeah.
There's a couple of things that you get in that. You get a tacit endorsement from that major artist that you matter and that your music matters and it's important. You get the fan base of that major artist coming over and becoming, in essence, an affinity fan base for you because they like them. They're going to like you because they've got now a direct connection to you. It's really, really brilliant. And I think, I wouldn't overthink it as an artist on TikTok. I'd load my music. I'd do dances to Cardi B songs and I'd sing right into the mic and see what happens. More than anything with social media, consistency is the most important thing you can do.
I'd pay to see that, Randall.
What? Sorry?
I'd pay to see you do that.
Oh, well, everybody has a price. But Jay, wouldn't you agree? Yeah. Consistency above all else?
Yeah, and I think a lot of these platforms, that's the key word, consistency. It's not just TikTok. YouTube is another great example. You want to be consistent, whether you're posting every week, make sure it's the same time every week, make sure your fans know that that's when new things are going to happen and diversify. I think a lot of folks are looking for that silver bullet, but in our minds, the silver bullet is really optimization, right? And making sure that you're involved with these. Don't be afraid of TikTok. Go in there and explore, see what other people are doing, see what speaks to your brand. There's an old saying, you want to go to where the party is. Don't start your own party. And there's a party over there at TikTok, and I think you need to be there.
Absolutely. So we're almost out of time, and I definitely, there's some questions. I know we could go for hours.
We really could.
We should do this as a series. We can definitely, I've got some questions I want to go over, but I think really importantly, on the marketing front, let's talk about yours, in my opinion, of the surfaces that matter. The places where, as an artist, you are bankrupt if you are not there in social media and in fan interaction. For me, the number one platform is Instagram. I mean, it's a tie right now because TikTok's come up, but I really think Instagram and TikTok are huge for artist engagement.
Yeah, I'm really big on those. I'm also still really big on YouTube, but not as just a place to dump your videos. I think if you have a strategy through your release cycle and you're releasing multiple videos, and I'm not talking about expensive concept videos, I'm talking about a lyric video, a pseudo video. A pseudo video is just the artwork with an audio bed. Maybe it's just a little teaser video. What's happened with video is it's gotten smaller and smaller bite-sized chunks. You have those 8-second canvas loops. You've got 15-second TikTok videos. You've got really quick little bites on socials. But I think a good YouTube strategy is really, really important to consistently post there, engage there. They have tools that, we can talk about maybe on our next episode, but there are a lot of tools that you can use there. It's a very powerful platform, but I find that too often people just dump a video there and then throw the link in other places. And that's not the right strategy.
Well, since you mentioned YouTube, on that front, you need to be collecting royalties from YouTube, especially for Content ID. Content ID if you've got material that's popular and being shared, it can be a massive, massive cache of money. I guess pun intended, for you there. So, we on behalf of our clients collected YouTube for Content ID. We can also collect publishing royalties directly from YouTube and platform. So if you have channels that are taking off, it's something that's really, really imperative that you kind of lock into, because YouTube, in many territories, YouTube is the number one place people are consuming music. It's the
by far.
Gosh, what was the statistical thing I used to hear? It's the number one search engine for music in the world. Or consumption place for music in the world, and it's the number 2 search engine in the world, more so than Yahoo. Think about that for a second. It's crazy. It's Google, and then for some reason YouTube is where people go to search for things. And so anything you have on there can be monetized. If you don't have an official artist channel, that would be goal number 1. Get your official artist channel set so that you can start monetizing that. And that's another item we can do for you. See, we are full service. I don't want this to be an infomercial, but it's kind of the point. So we have some questions. We've got about a little more than 10 minutes left. And so I have some questions that were actually sent in, and I wanted to kind of read through some of those. and answer them. And Jay, jump in on these where you can.
Sure.
And then we can have real live questions where you can actually unmute yourself and speak if you'd like to, if we can do it in a orderly fashion. But to start out, so Cedric Perry asked, what are suggestions that would make yourself a good candidate for Bodega Sync to rep you in the sync space? The same things that make you a great candidate for playlisting or for getting booked into a club make you a great candidate for sync. It always boils back to an engaged audience, to great music, to a great deal of synergy between all of your marketing and your musical output, and put in growth potential. The reality is, in sync, the music supervisors are checking the same statistics A&R is checking. They're looking to see what kind of following you have. You know, if we put this song in this show, how many people might come watch the show because the song's in it, because they tell their friends? That's a real decision that goes on. It's like a real estate transaction, okay? They give you the promotional prowess of the sync. What do you give them other than the music? You know, in some cases, if it's Imagine Dragons, they're bringing a wealth there. Everybody's coming with them. You know, on the independent artist spectrum, you've got to show why you stand out. So very similar parameters to how we decide whether we can be a distributor for someone are in place for whether we can be a sync rep for someone. Except I'd say it's a little bit, well, it's probably a lot more competitive, honestly. Because you know, you want a rep who's going to know you, know your music, and be an advocate. And at scale, that's really hard to do unless you have 100 employees running sync, listening to all these songs. So Gary B had a question. Does it cost money to register for SoundScan? You want to take that, Jay?
No, it doesn't cost money to register for SoundScan. Now, SoundScan became Nielsen Connect, which became MRC, but it's all the artist formerly known as SoundScan, right? It's, you know, how we track our sales streams and downloads. And as you know, Randall, you know, if you're going through a distributor, that's going to happen naturally through that process.
Yeah, and SoundScan's basically just taking the temperature on the success of your record. This is a great question, and I'm going to defer to you, Jay, and I want to see if your answer lines up with mine. But Tyler Johnson asks, he says, so you have great branding, publicists and radio people, distribution, everything is lined up. At this point, if you have all that going on, where should you put your marketing money towards? Where does that go?
Did he have, or he or she, did they have Publicist on there?
Publicist was there.
Yeah. I think a lot of the basic blocking and tackling is there. I think that when you're going from 0 to 60 these days, I think audience growth is the most challenging part. And there's lots of great tools out there, you know, Toned In and Foundy, and there's all sorts of great ways to kind of reach an audience and grow an audience. One of the things that we really love right now is, you know, these 15-second Instagram stories ads that drive people to a destination like YouTube or Spotify or someplace. I think that whether you're doing your own socials or hiring somebody to do your socials, I think that's key, because just because you know how to post to socials, a professional will know how to create a plan, a content calendar, create great assets, you know, look at the data. So there's always kind of that deeper step you can take on all of these things.
Awesome. So I have a similar answer to that, but I'd go one step further. I think that dollars to dimes. I think if you have everything, all your basic blocking and tackling done, and you've got money burning a hole in your pocket, and you're trying to figure out how to best deploy that money, I think there's no better spin than digital advertising. I think you can run targeted ad campaigns. We can do this on behalf of our clients. There are a million great companies out there that do this as well. But for our in-house clients, building that model of what your target is, we want people who listen to John Mayer and who are in their late 20s, early 30s, that live in the Midwest. You can really dial down the demographics and target that key audience and hit them with your content and with a call to action that brings them over to your Spotify to listen, brings them to your YouTube to subscribe. I think that is the very, and even if it's just a few $100s deployed a month, I think it's the very best use of money, especially for a DIY artist. I think you can really move mountains with that.
Yeah. The only thing I would just quickly add to that, Randall, is I agree with all of that. iHeart Radio is also offering some really great ways to kind of get down to a specific audience. And one little tool that people often miss that's really powerful is bands in town. If let's say you have 20,000 trackers, you can send them messages for free. Let's say you want to reach another audience. Let's say that the Chainsmokers audience would love your band. For 5 cents an email, you can reach them. So for very little money or for no money, it's another one of those great tools that you can use.
Absolutely. And so that leads us to the next question. One of the calls to action you can do in a digital advertising campaign is called a follow campaign. And it's to get people to follow your Spotify profile. The follower is the stickiest engagement you can find, I think, in any digital marketing, because people don't unfollow. Unless you do something that just irks me, I'm not going to take the time to log in, go to your profile, and unfollow you.
That's right.
It is almost permanent. So this leads to this next question from Chad Jackson, who says, Spotify playlists are notoriously hard to get on. Truth. I was able to get on Release Radar a few times and my streams benefited. I was wondering if there's a way to repeat that success. So Release Radar is targeted to your followers. Release Radar is directly correlated to your followers. Yeah. Jay, do you have any other insights?
Yeah, well, 3 of them, Discover Weekly, Release Radar, and Radio, are all drawing from those followers, right? So you want to make sure that you grow that number. It's super important because we watch that data every week. And I would say a majority of the plays, especially for developing artists, are coming from those 3 sources when you're talking about Spotify. But you have to be careful. You want real followers. There's a big trend now with pre-save, pre-ad, pre-order. And I always tell clients, don't do a big like guitar giveaway thing to get people to pre-save, because that's going to hurt you. You want real people who are actually, when it's dropped into their Release Radar or dropped into their library for pre-save, you want people who are actually going to listen to it. That's going to help you. Just having a bunch of people sign up to win something free isn't going to help you. But I agree 100%. And I think driving ads, especially like those Instagram stories ads that we talked about, if you have a compelling couple of seconds of video at the front when people are swiping through that, you can drive people to follow you. And that as well as kind of the YouTube, subscribe to my YouTube channel, I think those are 2 really powerful things. Awesome.
Let's talk about Bandcamp. Justin Butler is asking about Bandcamp strategies to use that Bandcamp followership to monetize on other platforms. Jay, what's your experience with that?
I don't really go too deep into Bandcamp. I do have a couple of clients that swear by it and are deep into it, but I'm not really well versed in it. I don't use it every day.
Okay. And I admittedly also I'm super deep onto Bandcamp. I do believe in the reality of the digital footprint and making sure that your ancillary services are always tagged in whatever surface you're on. So, I do believe that there are ways to translate those followers. I will say that Symphonic does have a partnership with Bandcamp, and we do deliver to Bandcamp on behalf of our clients. There's no money made there at all on our side, but we are able to deliver there. And it is probably notable, and you probably know this, many of you, but on the first Friday of every month, 100% of those purchases at Bandcamp go right into your pocket. So if I was doing anything with Bandcamp, I'd be pushing people there for the first Friday and elsewhere for every other day of the month, to the best of my ability.
Yeah. And again, it's like go to where the party is, right? They've got a pretty good amount of people that go there to discover music and to congregate. So it's important to be there.
Absolutely. And you guys are asking great questions here. This is going to take a minute to unpack, and we may not have time to unpack it fully. But Pete Roderick has asked, sorry, I need to read this. This isn't just a quick question. Moving music streaming towards a user-centric payout model puts an emphasis on the fan-artist connection. Do we think collective playlisting and a platform like Feature.fm support this initiative more directly?
Well, let's talk about user-centric for a second, just so people understand. If I listen to the Accidentals my entire month on Apple Music or Amazon Music, the Accidentals don't get or the rights holder, I should say, maybe their label, they're not getting my $9.99, right? And a lot of people want to move to that user-centric model. And there's a lot of discussion. We won't drag down this discussion, but just know that it's being discussed right now in the UK, in Parliament. There's a lot of discussion going on about how we can make this whole ecosystem more fair. I love Feature FM. I think it's a great team over there. We've had them on the podcast. I use Feature FM. I think that we're going to be evolving. This whole thing has been around like a week and a half. We're all just learning, in this new music business. Anybody who tells you they got it figured out, it's changed while we've been having this discussion. So I guess I would say to that, I love the model. I just think it's going to take a lot to get there.
Agreed. We got time for one more question, and I love this question, and so I'm going to answer it here with your help, Jay. Dan Conley asks, what is the best content release strategy? Release singles over time, release an EP, or release a full album at once? And I already know what you're going to say, so I'm going to let you say it, and then I'll jump on.
I always say there's no silver bullet, right? And there are a lot of great ways to release music, but it's an always on music business. Let's start there. It's not like an 18-month release cycle where you release something and then next year you put out something else. People have short attention spans. I think that you want to continually engage your audience with releasing music, releasing videos, posting to social, just engaging and really communicating and hearing and responding to your audience. And I think there's no better way to do that than release music. I will tell you that one release cycle that worked really well for us was the band Vintage Trouble. Instead of dropping an album, we dropped an EP. Then we dropped another EP with those exact same 5 songs reimagined, not just acoustic, but like maybe a reggae version of one and a stripped down version of one, but the same songs. Then that was put together as an album, like on vinyl. We repeated that with the next EP. It was the EP, then 5 live versions, and then another. And we dropped focus tracks in between with a release cadence that for a year kept new music coming, gave them something to talk about on socials, gave them something new to play live in a non-COVID world. So I would say the short answer, I think, is get creative. There's no one answer. Like when you're talking about jazz, that wouldn't really work that well in jazz. Jazz is more of an album art form. And I think you need to release that album. It's not really a track-based medium, a lot of it. So that would be my advice.
Awesome. And just piggybacking on that, my advice is this. Vast majority of the artists I work with are in the rock, alt rock, country, pop lane. Little rap here and there. I'm genre agnostic here. I love music. I love good music. Popular music that falls into that popular space tends to perform really well on a track by track release basis. And there's reasoning behind that. And the reasoning that I tend to lean on is that you can only market one track at a time to the DSPs. You can only pick one focus track. So if you have an album full of 10 incredible songs and you decide I'm going to drop this album, there's a couple of questions you have to ask yourself. One question is, is the album itself a standalone piece of art that cannot be severed? Is it a dark side of the moon situation? If the answer to that is yes, and you have a fan base who's engaged enough to go listen to 65 minutes of music in one fell swoop, then dropping an album makes a lot of sense. If it's not the case, which most of the time is not the case, people don't have the attention span to listen to more than a few tracks at a time, my recommendation is always a single based release strategy that goes at 4 to 6 week intervals, build up to the release it. Now, what we see on Chartmetric is from the date of release, if there's good marketing, in a perfect world, those monthly listeners are going to go like this. They're going to go on a nice little hockey stick up. I said that for you, Allie. My Canadian in the room. And that hockey stick is going to go up for about 4 weeks. And then it's going to start to plateau, and then it's going to decay. And the goal and the dream scenario is to catch that hockey stick before it decays. Catch it on the plateau, it's fine. You just don't want to catch it when it's decaying, because the goal is to get the monthly listener count up. Because I'm telling you, there's some next level technology out there, and I can look at monthly listener counts and, back of the napkin math. If it's steady, I can tell you how much money you're going to make next year off of Spotify. That is one of those things that is really a great thing to keep an eye on for our commercial health as a musician. Now, Spotify is not the only platform, and there are cases where things are exploding on YouTube and not really huge on Spotify, and those anomalies exist. But for all intents and purposes, when we talk streaming music, we talk about Spotify. Spotify to me is like Kleenexes with tissues. It's just the name that I use for the whole big piece. But rolling out a single release strategy, and then what I always tell people to do, and I have some staffers on here who've heard me say this a million times, is roll out, if you have a 5-song EP, roll out 3 singles. One of those songs is a throwaway. You've got a 4th single focus track on the EP, and you can button it all up at the end of the EP. Then wash, rinse, repeat. Do it over and over and over. Content is king. And the most important thing you can do is be releasing content, be engaging your audience, be getting in people's face and explaining to them why you matter, why your music matters. Get your marketing drivers together. Put a chip on your shoulder. Imagine you get cornered and somebody says, you got 30 seconds to explain to me why you're more important than 40,000 other songs next Friday.
That's right.
Because that's what our marketing team has to do. That's what we as your advocates, that's what Jay for his clients as their advocates, that's what your artist manager is doing. That's what your booking agent is doing. Venues don't care. All venues care about is ticket sales. They don't care how good the music is. You have to look at this with that business acumen. And I think if you do, if you look at it through that lens, I think there's great, great things you can do in 2021. And with that, friends, we are like over time, and I could keep going for another 5 hours with my friend Jay here.
Thank you,
but
brother.
please join me in thanking Jay for his participation here. Thank you all for being here and for your participation. Justin Butler, thank you for your beard, because I thought I was the only beardo in the room, and I'm thrilled to see somebody else here with a good beard. Jay has one of the most incredible podcasts, and I'm going to brag on him for a second.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it.
It's called My Morning Coffee.
Your Morning Coffee.
Every Friday morning. Say it again.
It's Your Morning Coffee.
Well, it is My Morning Coffee. Every Friday, Your Morning Coffee. Subscribe to it. It's incredible.
Thank you.
He talks about every Friday there's new subject matter. It's all really, really next level good stuff. Obviously, you're here because you know the brand Symphonic. Symphonic blog is, I think, dollars to donuts, one of the very, very best blogs out there.
Absolutely.
For a musician. I've seen other distributors quote it on their blogs, and that was when I was like, okay, we're onto something pretty cool here. So Symphonic blog is something great. Make contact with us, guys. We're here to be your advocate. I'm at Randall Foster on Instagram and most socials. Follow me. Let's be friends. Let's hang out. Let's make music together. And thank you all so much for being here today.